Welcome to this Feast of Tabernacles. We're so blessed to be able to observe this feast this year. And you look at the world and the things that have happened in this past year. I think of the parable, the analogy that's given of a woman in labor, ready to give birth. And as the contractions get closer and closer, and the things that are happening in the world are getting closer and closer to bigger events as they get down that particular path that it's headed. And we see those things happening before our very eyes. I think back a few years ago, we tend to think, of course, of human birth, and it happens in a very short period of time, in essence, not for the woman, but sometimes not for the man. but but for the woman who's giving the birth, that doesn't seem like a short time. But in human life, obviously, it is relatively short compared to what God is giving for the end of his plan over 6,000 years and what's taking place here at the end time and the contractions and the like that are taking place in the world around us. So we see this analogy, and it might seem like a long time to us, but if you look over the past many years and understand this process, that it continues to take place, it continues to become stronger, but that's just the analogy that's given, that there are going to be periods of time where it goes back to normal, and it's like, how can this be after something so incredible in the sense of a clash that could develop into a great war, and then it backs off again? And we understand there are certain things that have to take place. We understand what has to happen in the first four trumpets, and those events, when they begin to take place, we know what they are. So we see other things in the world taking shape, nations siding more and more with one another, and all the things that are transpiring there. And we live in scary times. We live in horrible times. I hate to see what's happening in countries and nations, and knowing what it's headed to, especially. But even as it were, if it weren't headed for that, I hate to see what's going on in the world. It's so sick. It truly is. And of course, the more we can understand about God's way of life and have right minds, sound minds, minds that are becoming more sound, the more we see these things around us. It's kind of like someone in the church who is growing and developing and has been around for a long time, and they're of a maturing age, a very mature age in that respect, and they see others sometimes, and if not careful, can judge in a harsher way. Because the reality is, we've been through a lot of things. Some of us have been through a lot of things. We can see a lot of things because of that experience, and others aren't there yet. They're not able to see those things. So our ability to have compassion on one another, to give patience to one another, this is an important thing that we need to remember, that we all are being molded in fashion in different ways at different times, and we're at different levels, and to realize that we need to give time to one another. And anyway, there's so much to learn from the process of life that God has given us, whereby we can grow spiritually. So again, here we're blessed, so blessed to be here at this Feast of Tabernacles. We see thunders over this past year that are becoming more and more intense. I think of the one, as I'm pre-recording this right now, that has happened down in Texas, where a flash flood came along, and this one's probably bothered me more than some because of what happened. But right now, today, as of today, there are 81 that have died. And I understand, as someone mentioned in services, which is good, this is so small compared to what's coming. This is so small, but nevertheless, whether it's small or large, it's tragic what happens to human life, the tragedies that can take place. And here, 20 some girls in a camp that were gathered together, uh, lost, they can't find them. They believe they're obviously a part of the flood, the victims of the flood, but that'll be added to the total as well. And think, what a horrible thing, but to think of someone in the prime of their life and young life, and yet I realize, I know that they're going to be resurrected to a time that is so awesome. They're going to be able to see things that they're going to be able to compare two worlds in a way that are incredible, truly. And the lives they're going to have at that time and be able to begin to live and fulfill then is going to be far greater than what it is now, because they were at an age, if you will, of just getting ready to go out and see the kind of evil that's out there and experience more of the evil that's in the world, because there's a lot of it out there, especially for teens as they grow up and enter into early adulthood. It's just getting worse and worse and worse. And so many minds getting messed up because of all that's out there to mess up the mind. It's horrible. And so we see these kind of things coming to pass, trumpets that are getting closer and closer as we understand, and they're leading up to the seventh trumpet. What an incredible thing to understand that once the events begin, they're going to move rapidly forward to the seventh. And that's the one we so look forward to, which pictures this Feast of Tabernacles in large part, the beginning of the millennium period, and the opportunity for people to begin having one government, not all the massive confusion today, stability and peace and plenty that God is going to give, the prosperity that we can't even begin to imagine at this point that mankind cannot give mankind. Somewhere in some parts of the world, just like in the United States, there's some who are more prosperous than others, and others who struggle horribly so. And generally, that's the larger parts of the population. People struggling, even in a country of such affluence, if you will, so much abundance of everything. But anyway, we're in that period of time. And so we're here, leaving the world behind us. We have the opportunity to attend the Feast of Tabernacles as a whole. There are some who have to be at home because we have a lot of people. As the church gets older, people get older, and things happen in health that you can't travel as you did in the past. And yet you're not alone. We understand that. But they're still not the same thing in the sense of experiencing a feast like they've normally experienced in times past. And that's a hard thing to go through. And it's good for brethren to remember them and realize that they're not able to be there with you to share in the same things. And some who haven't been able to go for years and years and years. And yet they continue to hold on. When I think of a lot of them, I think of the Old Testament because there weren't a lot of people. They were by themselves, and that's a hard thing. That's not an easy thing. And so to see that faithfulness of people remaining faithful and strong and continuing on like that, that's a lot. And that means a lot to me personally to see that out there. It gives me encouragement. It truly does. So again, we have a lot of people then who are able to attend the feast this year. And we are blessed to be out of this world now for this period of time. God has given us a space of time, 8 days that we're going to be hearing sermons and have our minds focused on those things that are from God, the things that are spiritual in life, and the lessons that we can learn and be focused upon, and the messages we're going to hear. We're very, very blessed in a world that's in such massive confusion and chaos out there. We are so blessed to be gathered together to share with one another. And that sharing and fellowship is an incredible experience. It's one that we need to take advantage of. It's one we need to use properly and rightly toward one another. And to understand it's such an incredible blessing. And to thank God continually throughout the feast that we have this, not just to take it for granted, just being another feast, but being special and striving to make it special. God wants us to do that, to think in that context, that manner, and to keep him in the forefront, to be seeking to put him first, and then to enjoy this feast on a level that hopefully we've never experienced to the same degree before because of what we put into it individually. And that's going to be able to be dependent upon, if you will, it will depend upon what you put into it, what each individual puts into it, what we receive out of it. So again, here, we're blessed to picture that millennial period when there's going to be peace, when it's not the world like we know it today. We're blessed to come out of the world in a greater way, away from our jobs, away from all the hustle and bustle and confusion and chaos, and a lot of times just getting away totally from some of the news that's out there and being able to have this time together. It's an awesome thing. It's an incredible blessing to be enjoyed, to be savored. God wants us to savor it. It's only a short period every year that God has given to us to do this. And when it's over, it's over. And if you were ever able to stay at a feast site a day or 2 days afterwards, you know it's over. It's just so different when the world's back. Incredible what God is, and we're picturing that in the millennium. One government on the earth, one church, truth that is all over the world. I so look forward to that time. Writing this book has given me uh, an added perspective, if you will, encouragement of what's about to come, to realize we're getting very close to all these things being able to be seen by people, that they're going to know the things that are there. They're going to be able to learn them and learn them quickly because they've already been established within God's church ahead of time. God so blessed us to help us establish so many truths and to understand the process of how we grow, how we change as this book has progressed and showing some of that process in a greater way. So again, awesomely, awesomely, magnificently blessed. We should feel that. We should think that. So I think of how it was just 1 year ago today. 1 year ago, exactly. I'm sorry, 2 years ago. I said 1 year ago, 2 years ago, when we had the incident in the world where the Israelis were overrun in one part of their country and people taken hostages and all the evil that came out of that as they came out of Gaza and took people back into Gaza and then some of the evil in the world, the minds that are out there and the way people think, and then the world that backs that up. It's just like it shows what the world is like. It shows how evil the world has become. It's like politics today. You see people elected into office that don't have any soundness of mind whatsoever. Their minds are mush. Their minds are weird and far out. And just how can you express it except to say unsound? But when I see that, I worry more about and more concerned about the fact that they were put into office by people whose minds are mush. To do that, to to put people into office who are so weird and so off, it shows where people are. They're weird and far out there. And they don't want anything that's sound. They want everything just to be as frivolous and are free, anything they want to do, ever how they want to live, and they want it paid for by government or whatever. Anyway, it's a sick, sick world we live in. It's just getting worse and worse and worse. And that reveals a lot about where we are in time. It truly does. So again, you think of that brutal attack and what took place and the things that have happened since that time, and we're just edging closer and closer and closer. And we need to keep focused on that to realize we don't have a lot of time left. I don't know how much I'm giving this. I don't know if we'll be at the feast. I feel like we will because of the book, because I feel like there's a purpose in it being written, a purpose in it being written in a different style, and in the content of it, not talking about war because people just don't care and they don't believe it anyway uh, about some of the things that were written previously. So this has had a totally different focus, and it's a awesomely inspiring and encouraging focus in the sense of God, God's way of life, God's truth, and explaining those things and what's happened to people and why the world is like it is, what happened to Judaism, what happened to traditional Christianity, and coming to be able to face, if people can, they will at different stages. At some point, they're going to have to, one way or the other. And so you think about that process of what they're going to go through to understand how they came to believe some of the things they did, to realize what a job that Satan did. It's not mankind that could plan that out. It's Satan. And God allowed it for a purpose, for a purpose. Incredible. And it's for his church overall, for those who are being molded and fashioned to come through that, to see those things, to learn those things, to be able to be drawn to truth, to have the truth, to grasp it by faith, to understand, to be able to believe and then hold on to it and fight for it, because that difference can be seen between the world and what God gives to us, and then to realize it's in our choices, in our hands, what we do with it then. And we're judged accordingly. That's how we're molded and fashioned. So again, thinking about that 2 years ago, about that incredible attack and what took place, and Vince just getting closer and closer. But we begin observing this feast that God has given to us each year by doing exactly what God tells us to do. We need to be told why. When we observe Passover, we know what we're going to hear. When we observe the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, we know what we're going to hear. The seventh day, Pentecost, and on it goes. When we hear about atonement on that day, that's what we're going to hear because that's what God says we're supposed to do. That's what our focus is supposed to be. I still can't help but think about one sermon one time early on in United after the apostasy, and one minister getting up there and giving the most sick, perverted, disgusting, insane sermon. Had nothing to do with atonement. Had nothing to do with God, had nothing to do with the truth. It was very untrue. And astounding, the things we've gone through in the church. It truly is. The battles we've had, the things we've seen, but it's for our good. It's for our molding and fashioning. And those who went through that and are here today and have learned from that as well are molded and fashioned in a special way, a unique way that's different from people during Laodicea who were able to come through that and who died in the faith, people during Philadelphia who came through that period of time and died at that time. They're being molded and fashioned for something different than what you and I are. We're being molded for something different because we're all in the body in a different place. We're all in the temple in a different place. And then there are those who are being molded and fashioned to be the beginning of a new age, to be able to be there. Incredible. The opportunities, the blessings God has given to us. Blessings. Things we're to think about at the feast. Incredible. So again, here we're to be told about his feast, so that's what I'm going to do. We're going to go over to Leviticus 23 as we do every year and go through some of these things and talk about them and focus upon them because it's spiritually healthy that we do just that. We need it year by year by year. And we're to be stirred up and excited about it year by year by year. We're to think about it and be thankful for it, even though we know what's going to be said in large part. We're to think about it and be reminded of it so that we have a keener focus right now at the beginning of this feast to carry it throughout the rest of the feast. Verse 1, then the Eternal spoke unto Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, concerning the appointed times of the Eternal. I'm going through and writing about this in the book and how awesome it is to distinguish those things and to realize how far out the world has gone from it, how far out Judaism went from it. And then traditional Christianity didn't have a chance because they just totally rejected anything that seemed like it might be of Judaism. So, concerning the appointed times of the Eternal, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations. So, suggestion? No. God says you will proclaim. Sometimes it uses the word so often, shall and so forth, and so often it just should be will. You will do this. This is what you are to do. And you are going to proclaim these holy convocations to be holy. Holy. I love the word. Set apart, sacred, in other words, by God, set apart by God, because God has set it aside. It's his appointed time, and he's told us this is your appointment, and this is what you're to keep. And it's holy. I've sanctified it. I've set it apart for holy use and purpose. So that's what we're doing today. We're setting apart this day for holy use and purpose, for the use of God's church, for the use of the message that we're to receive and the message we're to focus upon, and to receive what God gives to us then, to apply it then, to seek to apply it, to pray about it and ask God for help to do it, to live it. Because if we don't pray about it, it's not going to happen to the degree that it should be where we can be blessed more greatly. We have to ask God for help to do what he gives us to do. So it's set apart for holy use and purpose. And God shows us how to use it in the right way, in a holy way, so that we can grow more, so the church can grow more, so we can be edified and strengthened more. Convocations, times to meet together, convening. Even these are my appointed times. So I think of the book of Mankind. What does that mean? They're my appointed times. They don't care. Well, they don't even know that's what it says. But anyway, 6 days shall work be done. And they really can't help it. That's something to always have in mind, There are a lot of people, it's what religious leaders have done and scholars, so-called, have done and so forth, and what Satan has done and the confusion that people have in their minds then. A person is not judged or doesn't begin to be judged until they learn the truth and what they do with it then. That's why it's so horrible when people know the truth and learn things that are true and they leave it and they leave the church. To leave and embrace things in the world, to begin polluting the Sabbath, to begin living differently on the Sabbath, because that happens. To go out and do whatever you want to on the Sabbath, then because, well, you're not in the church anymore, and because you've rejected it, and you think it just gets worse and worse and worse. So to go back to those things after you've known the truth, people know the difference between, you know, is Christmas to be kept? Is Easter to be kept? They know where it came from. They have that knowledge. And yet to associate with the world and do those, be involved in some of those kinds of things eventually, because some people do. Candidly, too many do. Or to go back, anyway, just go on and on. But 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh is the Sabbath of rest, a holy convocation. So this sets the framework for all the holy days because it's about a 7,000-year plan. 7,100, we understand that. But a 7,000-year plan for humanity to multiply on the earth because it stops after 7,000 years. And what happens in 100 years later, then we understand it's a separate time totally and completely, not to be confused in the first 7,000 years. So anyway, so 6 days, the seventh reminds us God is our creator. He made us. We belong to God. And yet, man can't think that way. Man can't respect that as a whole. It takes God's help. That's why the world can't help it until they're being drawn by God, because to varying degrees, there are certain things that can be done, and mankind is judged according to that. But as a whole, we understand that when it comes to the truth and being able to grow and being able to have sins forgiven requires a calling from God. And we look for that when it's given to this whole world and we enter the millennial period and that begins to happen. You shall do no work in it. It is a Sabbath of the eternal in all your dwellings. These are the appointed times of the eternal, even holy convocations, which you shall proclaim at their appointed time. So beautiful. That's why the ministry is always to do that. Always, always, always. On the high days. The high days are to have content that are about the meaning of those days. Things during the Feast of Tabernacles can be related in different ways to God's plan or God's purpose, but as a whole, the period in between this day and this sermon and the last great day, because that's going to be very specific, can have many different kinds of sermons that God desires to give to us, wants us to receive certain things at this particular time, to grow in, to learn, so we can become stronger and candidly have more of the fruit of God's Spirit in our lives. It's a time for being molded and fashioned in a very unique way. Verse 5, in the 14th day of the first month at even. What a beautiful thing to understand Ben Ha Erbaim, between the two evenings. And I hope that some have come to even a clearer understanding than how incredible that phrase is that has been given, and to understand how Judaism itself, understanding Hebrew, didn't grasp this. And to deny certain things that should be so very obvious, even to a carnal physical mind, between two evenings, and to change that to something that begins to happen as the sun is going down because they distorted a scripture in Deuteronomy. And somehow then, as it gets down to sunset, how they put that all together then and mess that up too. So it's like at sunset, then you have this period of time before this the sky is totally black. Now I don't know how you measure that because you can't. So what point? You think that drive ultra right Jews, if you will, a little bananas. But anyway, it doesn't, because they want to do things 3 days in advance before a holy day begins, have all the leaven out 3 days in advance, and fast sooner and fast longer. And we've had that in the church as well. But anyway, between the two evenings, beautiful, so simple. On the 14th, between those two evenings, it's like That's really such a no-brainer. But anyway, verse 39. Also in the 15th day of the seventh month. This is the seventh month in God's calendar that He's given to us to go by to measure times for holy days and so forth. And the first day of the seventh month, we know what that is. Everyone should know. Feast of Trumpets. This is on the 15th day of the seventh month. When you've gathered in the fruit of the land, so as a whole, in that particular part of the world, it's not the same in different areas. So in that part of the world, this is how it was measured by and what was given to them. Because then as time went along, the understanding of these things God would give to the church. But this is what it's talking about. It's talking about the great fall harvest and the things that come in that are ready to be harvested then in the fall is far greater than what is grown and harvested in the spring. And so this is what it's talking about. So it says, after you've gathered in the fruit of the land, again, for them it was physical, but much more for us, because this is the time of year we are to stop and think about what we have, the fruit, the blessings of life that God has given to us, what God has given to us that we're to be thankful for and to do what He tells us to do then, because this is the time of year to focus on those things. So this is what it was for those of Israel. So when you've gathered in the fruit of the land, you shall keep a feast unto the eternal, unto the eternal. We need to remember that. We're not just keeping this because it gives us a chance to get away and go off someplace and be together with one another, and which is awesome because it's a part of it, but it's unto Yahweh Elohim and His son Joshua now. It's unto them how we live it, what we do, why we're here, and so forth. It's in essence something to be given to them by how we respond. And it tells us how to do that spiritually. So you shall keep a feast unto the eternal. We need to think about that during this feast. It's to be given to God. We're to be doing this unto God. And if we grasp that, it's going to mean a lot more to us. On the first day shall be a Sabbath, and the 8th day shall be a Sabbath. Even you shall take to yourselves on the first day boughs of good trees. So again here, what an incredible thing. Things are mistranslated right and left. No wonder they lost such sight of things, because scholars, teachers got involved, and some wanted things in there for different reasons and different purposes to totally mess things up. And anyway, and God's left it there for us to uncover, to find, to be encouraged by, to be inspired by when that time comes. So, especially within the church over the past 2,000 years, there have been things that have come to light. People have come to understand things in a greater way than ever before. And it's exciting when it comes to light, things that have been hidden or buried. So again, here, this word here is the word for fruit. The first thing you're to do is to think about the fruit of the good fruit, if you will. The fruit of good trees, from good trees. It's bearing good fruit. Got to be a good tree. So again here, that's where fruit comes from. And so we can look at ourselves and think about ourselves and the fruit that's to be produced in our life and where it comes from God. He makes it possible so that we can grow and grow complete. Awesome. But this word here, again, I say this every time I go through this, it's only translated this way here, the boughs, rather than fruit. Only here. Every place else they translated it correctly. You think, why? What was your motivation? What was your 118 times as fruit in other places because you knew it was fruit? Anyway. And then it goes on to say branches, which isn't branches in this case. It's palms, the palms like a palm tree or whatever. So they had these things there that would possibly be for shade and so forth once the frame is there, and fasten them to this booth that they're to make. So it's telling them this is what they're going to construct. And so again, here are the palms. Then finally, the branches of thick trees. You have a frame and it's going to need to be sturdy. And the branches of thick trees is going to help establish that. And everything else in between then, as it goes on to say, and the willows of the brook, the smaller ones and so forth. And then you make this little thing to sit in. Incredible. And you shall rejoice. So they were told to rejoice. We're told to rejoice. So they were told to rejoice then, to sit there, as it goes on to explain. So they're to rejoice, to be glad, to be happy. Now, we're not always happy and we're not always glad living in this world, but we're not in the world at the feast. We're blessed to be in a different location, or we're blessed to be at home and to focus upon this 8 days that God gives to us. We're blessed and we're to be glad and happy about that, to cherish that time together with God, with what He gives to us during this period. And again, enjoying what God has given us and what He gives to us then, even at this time. So you are to rejoice before the eternal, your God. So we're doing this before God. So we're to think about that during this feast. And if we come to a point in time when we're not rejoicing, we're not happy, we need to have a check. We need to do a self-check. And if we have someone that's maybe close to us that might remind us, are you happy? When you're not, when maybe something has happened and a little grumpy or a little upset about something, are we happy? Now, I'm not suggesting that everyone do that because it may not be met with favor or kindness. But you know what? Not bad either. Just have to be wise and definitely not do it in front of others. But unless there's really, 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 really warranted, you have to pay the price if it's not. So again, I'm not encouraging people to do this. Please, please, please. But I'm just saying, what if somebody said that? Are you happy? Are you glad today? And it's like, you better be careful. It's kind of like that salt thing. When that minister, I've told this so many times. I think everybody in the church knows full well what I'm saying. And all the ministry were talking about the feast that they were getting ready to go attend. And they were being advised that we don't want to do like we did last year. And we want to be able to be positive about things and not complaining and so forth. And when they got the soup around and one individual had way too much salt, he made the comment, this soup is too salty. And then he caught himself, just the way I like it. And that's good. Same thing with being happy. Are we happy? Are we glad at the feast? Well, we need to catch ourselves and to realize what we've done when we're not living up to what God has told us to at the feast, that we are to be happy, that we are to be glad at this time, and to realize if we're not, something's wrong and we need to correct that quickly because God tells us, commands us, we are to rejoice. We are to be happy. We are to be glad. You have to work at that. You have to guard against things that might interfere with that. Self primarily. And things didn't go right, didn't go our way. So we react in a way that's not good. No, we should strive truly to fight against that during this feast. To be happy during the feast. To help others to be happy. Because if you're not happy, you can affect others and make them a little less happy because of your spirit or because of your attitude. And as a whole, this happens every year, the feast. It's getting less and less, it seems like, which I am tickled about, I'm thankful for. And maybe because I'm not being told at different times, I don't know, which is fine too, because that means it's still getting less and less, and people are catching themselves more and realizing, oh, we don't want to make this bigger than what it is. Anyway. So indeed, we're to be filled with excitement at this feast, excited to be here. Don't let that go by the wayside. Are you excited to be here at the feast? Are you excited? You have to think about that. Just as I'm talking about it, I'm thinking about it. I'm excited that I'm going to be at the feast. I'm not there yet, but just talking about it, I'm excited because it's such a different environment and all the opportunities together with God's people. It was a little harder for my wife and I last year because of my allergies to the new carpet in that building. And In some ways, it was a difficult one in some respects. So we tried to go over there at different times to catch people as they were coming out and to be able to visit more in that regard. But I couldn't go in there very long. I did try to go in a few times, but I couldn't stay in there 5, 10 minutes max. And it starts bothering me. And I can't take it. It affects my heart even. So it's a bad environment for me to be in. I understand that, but it affected my fellowship and had to make it work though. So we got a different place and broadcast it from there because we had to have a bigger room so I can set up the camera and everything set up day by day so that I could give the live sermons that they would be hearing there. The ones that were there, uh, they're in the Dallas area, Grapevine area. So again, here, I missed out on that. And this year, I'm looking forward to not missing out on it and having the opportunity then to do more of that. And that's exciting to me. It really is. So we need to be excited wherever we are. There in Australia, gathered together, that you were able to be together. You know, we're getting smaller everywhere we are. They're smaller. Uh, those in New Zealand that were able to go over, I'm thankful that they were able to make it over there. And because the more that can make it together in an area, the more rejoicing that there is at a feast in that regard. And people are able to share things together in a way that is unique and special. And there's a binding power there, especially with God's Spirit, then, that He lets us experience. And there's a oneness and a unity that we're able to grow in that's encouraging. And that's awesome. It truly is. So, again, of course, the US and then up in Canada and different places where people are gathered together. We're going to be in the Netherlands. So, we're looking forward to being able to be together with everybody. And so this is awesome. So we're to make certain that the environment around us is kept in one that is to be rejoiced in at God's feast. So we have to think about the environment we're in and to not let it in any way deter us from the ability to be excited about being there, to enjoy one another, and keep that in our mind. Ask God for help to do that. Help me to rejoice. Help me to keep this excitement up for the feast, for what I'm hearing, and the fellowship that I'm able to have, and the events and the things together that we can do that we don't get to do the rest of the year with brethren. So again, nothing should interfere, nothing should tarnish the ability to rejoice, the ability to be happy at this feast. And it's one that we have to work to control individually in our own environment. Verse 41, it goes on to say, "So you shall keep a feast unto the eternal 7 days in the year. It shall be a statute forever in your generations." So again, generation by generation, whatever generation you're in, keep it as a statute, knowing this is commanded by God. You shall celebrate it in the 7th month. So again, that puts in that a word that helps us to realize there's more to it. It's to be celebrated. What do you do when you celebrate something? Well, it's a special occasion. You mark this occasion in a special way. You celebrate it and make it more enjoyable, to be excited about it, to plan things, to do things, whatever it might be. So again, you shall celebrate it in the 7th month. You shall sit in booths 7 days. So it doesn't mean for 7 days, obviously, but they were to go out and sit, have a time, probably for many, for most, it would be early morning, maybe in an evening, maybe both, but to go sit there and they were to think about certain things. God told them this is what you're to focus on when you do this. They didn't have what we have where they're able to go out and hear a sermon like that. No, they did have individuals that would speak and so forth about different things about God, and on the high days especially. But the rest of the time and the way that's organized today, a little bit different. But we've experienced different things at different times. And we're talking about the church now in a unique way because we understand it spiritually, where for them it was just a physical thing. And they celebrated with the feasting, with all the animals and all the sacrifices and the abundance of food that they normally wouldn't have in the same degree that they were able to have at the feast. All who are born Israelite shall dwell, which again, continue to, or to abide, to sit, means basically the same thing. You should do this and sit there, abide there, remain there, dwell there It's just a little booth, but it uses this expression here. It's temporary. It's a little booth. It doesn't have walls around it. And yet you're to sit there and you're to contemplate, you're to think about the things that he tells us we should focus upon. So this is what he says, that your generations may know that I made the children of Israel, their forefathers, families, to dwell or to continue in booths. So when they came out of Egypt, this is what they were to think about, why or how they were able to be there, to give a clearer picture, if you will, to a purpose of why they were to be doing this and to give it meaning. And so, in a greater way. So, God says, you're to know this generation by generation. You're to pass this down generation to generation, to know and to remember as you look back. So, they were to look back at how God brought them out to make them a nation so they could do what they were doing in observing the feast and all of the holy days of God, that God brought them out to be a people, to be a nation. And so they were to think about those things and the history of what they'd gone through and those who'd gone away from it and those who held on to it, the different kings and the history they've had. And so they were told to do this and to remember, to think back. So he's telling them this here in Leviticus before they ever leave. So they were to do this all the way up through the times of the judges, all the way through the times of the kings, and on. This is what people were to do if they were to obey God. Excuse me. So again here, to remember that when they came out of Egypt, they dwelt in temporary dwellings. 40 years of it. It was a temporary thing. To realize what they went through in order to receive what they did, so that when they did come into the promised land and God began to give them the great blessings that he did on a physical plane in a far greater way, gave them the lands that he did, the wealth that they did, and that was able to continue to grow. Everybody was to think back to that. Temporary dwellings. They went through a lot. And our history, there's a lot that's happened for God to bring us where he did. God did this. God made it possible. God has given us this. And that's what they were to think about. God did it. God brought them out of Egypt. They were to remember that, not just during Passover and the days of unleavened bread. They were to remember at the Feast of Tabernacles and to remember and look back. The children of Israel dwelt there in the wilderness for all that time, temporary. But God gave that for a greater purpose. For the church to learn more, for those in the future to learn the spiritual purpose of that, of what it meant to dwell in a booth, a temporary dwelling. There's some things even in the church that we haven't fully grasped in times past concerning temporary dwellings and going to the feast and some of the things that were there. But God has blessed us to grow and mature in time. And that's how it is. People can't help it at different times until God reveals the greater meaning of certain things. How blessed are we that we can grasp and understand those things in a greater way? And during the millennium, there's going to be more given to where people will understand far more than what we know now. It's been that way for 6,000 years. And now with Joshua the Christ here for 1,000 years, giving more, it's going to be so incredible, truly. That your generations may know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in booths, again, temporary dwellings in their journey, when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the eternal your God. So what do we learn from it? God brought us out of Egypt, spiritual Egypt. We're in temporary dwellings. This is a temporary dwelling in the plan of God, each one of us. So we know this process, this battle of fighting, conquering, and overcoming sin and striving to remain faithful, to obey God's way of life. And we know we can't do it on our own. We have to have God's help. That's why we're to pray continually for help of God's Spirit so that we can be alert and on guard and fight against the greater weaknesses we have. As I've so often said, the 1, 2s, and 3s, whatever at the top of the list first, and then the other things as well. But the really bad ones, the harder ones, and more difficult ones, the ones that need change the most, those are the ones we need to zero in on the most. And then as they become less and less, Some of the things that are lesser will become greater, and we'll see, because that's growing then. An ability to grow, to conquer, to overcome. And again, all made possible by God, coming out of Egypt while in a temporary dwelling, because God's desire is to give us a permanent dwelling. Awesome to understand these things. So again, Israelites look back, we're to look back and forward. We're to remember what we're coming out of. It started before baptism, then we made that commitment, and then it's continued on ever since. Coming out of Egypt in a temporary dwelling. And we look forward to the time we're in a permanent one. And God is dwelling in us always. And Joshua the Christ is dwelling in us always by the power of the Holy Spirit, and we're blessed to dwell in them. Awesome, beautiful. Things to be thankful for, to rejoice in before God that we see these things, that we know these things, that we have these precious truths in here, in our heart, in our minds. This is our life. This is what we love. This is what we want. This is what we cherish. And we hold on to with God's help. To be blessed in that. So to rejoice before God. We have a lot to be glad about. We have a lot to rejoice in. And we're getting so close now. Truly, closer and closer and closer. So let's think about that word celebrate. When he says we're to celebrate, you shall celebrate it in the 7th month. Beautiful. Celebrate. The word celebrate. You think, what kind of planning goes into celebrating? You have to plan. It doesn't just happen. You've got to think about it. So again, considering some of the definition, to mark, in other words, something, or such as an anniversary, to mark something, to set it apart, mark it, such as an anniversary, by festivities or other deviation from a routine. So we're deviating from our normal routine. God's blessed us to have the atmosphere, the environment in which to celebrate, because we're not out in the world. You're not at your job. That's worth a lot of celebrating right there. So depends on what your job is, sometimes even a whole lot more. I feel for teachers, and I know some teachers, and I think that's a time to celebrate. You don't have to be around that. I know some nurses and certain things they have to put up with. And you think different jobs that people have and the world that they deal with sometimes, what a blessing to be free from that. So yeah, I'm celebrating. I'm having a great time. I'm glad that God has given me a time to celebrate. And so we all have to think about that. What an awesome thing we can celebrate, because we're not around the world. We're not around some of the drama that we see around us on a continuing basis, day by day by day. You don't have to go up and down those highways. I think of one individual that used to travel about 3 hours one direction. Now I think is down to close to 2 or 1.5, something like that. I can't remember. It varies, I think. And in order to have a better area in which to live, but they had to go back to that other job and drive all that distance. And I respect that mightily. That kind of a sacrifice for family. But what a horrible thing to be in that kind of traffic. And I think of some cities and the things that people have to drive through sometimes. And I don't like traffic. I don't like having to be out in it. I like it when it's open range. Not many there. And definitely not stopping and having to watch out all the time, people whipping in front of you or whatever it might be, or getting on your back of your bumper. And so anyway, what a blessing not to have to be around that, especially in some of the areas we're in. It adds to the ability to do that a lot of times. You don't have to worry about all that. Celebrate. It should be pretty easy to be glad, to rejoice, to be happy, and to think about those things and to realize this is what God has given us. He's given us the environment in which we can celebrate. We need to think about that, to be away from the world. Awesome. So again, time of festivities, a time of doing things together. In other words, it's a festive time. We have more that we're able to spend on foods as a whole. We go out to eat and perhaps trying something new on occasion. And it just makes it a more enjoyable environment, something to rejoice in, what we have, the opportunities of it. And a deviation from routine, as I mentioned, well, we definitely have that. So sometimes we can plan different things that are a deviation from our normal routine of what we might be doing and try some different things out there, whatever. and especially the opportunity of doing things with others in God's family. What a blessing. What a blessing to be together with people of like mind and who are becoming stronger every year. I rejoice in that. I truly do. I'm so thankful for that, that there's less drama, less problems. Sometimes, how can I say this? Some sermons anymore and some series, I have to ask for greater help in working on them because there are things we don't need in the same way in the church as we used to. There are times, a lot of times, sermons were a matter of results of problems and difficulties. And if something is happening in one area, it's a means of showing that there's some things like this happening in others and they need to be addressed. But the church is really growing. And to me, that's awesome. And because of that, there are fewer problems, there's less drama. What a blessing that is, that we're of a greater unity and oneness of mind and have less drama. That's something to be thankful to God about, to rejoice. I'm rejoicing in that. I'm rejoicing in it before the feast because I've been working on sermons. And I'm rejoicing in that. God is now starting to give us more things that have to do with things we can learn to help people as they begin to come out of Egypt. Awesome. So that we can be more sharp, if you will. Sharper is the right word, not more sharp, I guess, but sharper, clearer in how we express things, how we say things, to be able to help people, because that's going to be a lot of our job. Different ones are going to be asked questions, and we need to be able to help them. Not be afraid to help them, but to be willing and able to explain some things to them in a very basic way. What a blessing that's going to be to help people who are hungry, to help people who are hurting. It's an awesome thing. The transition in time that's before us, that's about to get ready to happen as we're about to enter into what we're picturing here at the feast, the millennial period, something that so many before us so look forward to, the establishment of the city of God, the establishment of God's kingdom. And we're there. We get to have that transition in our lives. And they lived in faith, they died in faith, and they're going to receive it when they're resurrected. But what an awesome thing. We know we're there. So again, different things we can do together. We have to think about them, plan them. They don't just happen. And to have an environment, to make an environment even more so that we can rejoice in, to have enjoyable times together that are geared toward that. Another definition, to take part in special enjoyable activities in order to show that a particular occasion is important. My wife and I just had the opportunity to do that in a very great way in August, first week of August there, our 50th wedding anniversary. So very special to us. So there are different things in people's lives that we can relate to, special activities that we're able to have, special things that we can do, and to show that it's important. So we need to think about that during the feast to show that the feast is important to us. It's important to us to give that to others, to reflect that for others, so that it's a better feast for everyone. It's about giving a feast, a good feast to others as well, not just receiving things and doing what we want to do and going off whatever, but it's including, it's about sharing. So think about that. God's feast is special, a time to share in with God, with Christ, with one another, of the rejoicing that we have, the thankfulness we have, making it special, being excited about it, thinking about it, because excitement doesn't just happen. It can happen up here. But we have to think about it sometimes to make it exciting. 1 Timothy chapter 6. So to celebrate God's feast is to immerse ourselves in learning to fully enjoy ourselves in this period of time. God's desire is that we deeply enjoy this time that we have together, to cherish it, to be thankful for it, to be thankful for it. 1 Timothy 6, verse 17. Declare to those who are rich in this present age not to be haughty. Think of the world, and it's not always just about wealth, but it's about how people think about themselves or their environment or what they have, or maybe it's education, maybe it's a certain position, or whatever it might be. And if that becomes the important thing, and then people measure others by that and are lifted up then or try to lift themselves up, that's a horrible state of human life. And so it says here, declare to those who are rich in this present age not to be haughty, nor to trust in uncertain riches, whatever those riches are. Like I said, it doesn't just have to be money and wealth. Uncertain riches. What is it that we cherish that we count as wealthy to us? That's why when people leave the church, they don't count God and Christ and brethren in the church to be where their wealthy and their riches are. They're willingly leave that to have something else that's of a greater importance to them in riches and what they count as riches and what they trust in. Because that's what happens when people leave. That's why the longer these things go on and the more I see those kinds of things, the stronger I feel about judgment because I realize the need for it. And it's not going to be pleasant in so many cases because this isn't owed to anyone. It really isn't. It's what we value, it's what we trust in, and that's what we rejoice in. So, things to learn. Nor to trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God. God has to be first. This is a feast to God. It's unto the eternal and to his son Joshua, who gives us richly all things to enjoy, everything that we can do in life, everything that we can have around us. God has provided. God has given it. Sometimes we don't think that way enough and what that really means. It's here to enjoy. It's here to drink in. And God has provided it all. Doing good, that they may be rich in good works. We just recently had a sermon series here, or you're going to have it because I haven't given it yet. But looking back here before the feast, had a series here about works and recognizing and focusing again on the fact that there are good works and there are bad works. And good works can only come as a result of God's spirit, of God's way of life, of living this way of life, and the fruit that can be in it that comes from God. And there are those things that we're to do that are good and right before God, and we're to strive to do that. So we're to be rich in those things, but that's up to us to put our energy into it. Because either way, good or bad, work goes into it. Work goes into bad works, and work goes into good works. And we need to work to accomplish that which is good. They don't just happen. And if by negligence or whatever, then, well, lazy is another thing. Ready to give, to be giving of oneself. That's why I talked about earlier, giving a good feast to others. There's so much to that if we understand it. Praying to God during the feast here that we be blessed to think in those terms and to see how we can give a better feast to others around us. It's going to take some work. It's going to take some doing. It doesn't just happen. It's got to be planned out. It's got to be thought about and prayed about. Willing to share. So again, this is a time, especially at the feast, a willingness to share, just to share in fellowship, to do our best to get out and visit with different ones, to share with one another, to talk to one another. There's a lot to that. Storing up for themselves a good foundation. So building up for ourselves a good foundation for the time to come, that they may lay hold on eternal life. So there's a lot here. That's what we're striving to do, laying hold on eternal life. We're all in this together in the church. We're all together. We're fighting the battles, and we have a camaraderie, a unity, a relationship that is unique because we're in a sense, the same boat. We're fighting the same things out here on a spiritual plane. And we want to be for one another in that then, and to respect one another, to respect those whom God has called, and to be thankful for one another. unique mindset we need to savor and nurture. Let's turn over to First Chronicles. First Chronicles 28. It's about King David and some things he said that we can learn from as well and think about in our own lives. But First Chronicles is a good place that talks about some of this because of what was taking place at this particular time. And it says, First Chronicles 28, turning over there, or looking it up on your iPad or wherever, if you're wanting to follow along. Verse 1. Now David assembled all Jerusalem, or at Jerusalem, all the elders of Israel, the officers of the tribes and the captains of the divisions who served the king, the captains over thousands and the captains over hundreds. The organization that started through Moses and followed on through Israel, of establishing a way to deal with larger groups of people, that it gets to a point where an individual can only watch a certain amount and be with a certain amount of people, and then things are passed along if there's a need to, as far as information. But captains of tens, captains of 100, captain of 1,000. So it says here, the stewards of the substance of the possessions of the king and of his sons, with the officials, the valiant men, and all the mighty men of valor, the mighty men of war, and different ones who were known in their sense of things that they had accomplished and done and how they were being used and serving. Then King David, says, rose to his feet and said, hear me, my brethren and my people. I had it in my heart to build a house of rest for the ark of the covenant of the eternal and for the footstool of our God, and made preparations to build it. So again, what an incredible thing, physical things that we are blessed to learn from spiritually. Is it in our heart to be part of help building God's house? Because we're part of it, each one of us. And we have to work to build, and we hopefully help others in their building by being together in unity and oneness and peace and so forth. But God said to me, you shall not build a house for me or for my name, because you are a man of war and have shed blood. Moreover, the eternal God of Israel chose me above all the house of my father to be king over Israel forever. For he has chosen Judah the ruler, and of the house of Judah, the house of my father, and among the sons of my father, he was pleased with me to make me king over all Israel. So David was moved by that. He understood, a young boy, whippersnapper, herding sheep in the field, and this relationship of things God did with him to help him in doing what he's doing, because he looked to God for help and strength. Killing bear, killing lion, I can't imagine as being on foot and doing certain things like that. And yet he was that kind of a person. And God was there, and he saw God in his mind, in his being. And God was working with him to prepare him for what he was going to do through him as time went along, because it wasn't just by circumstance or chance that Judah was chosen, that David was chosen, that promises were given to David of a lineage that would come from him, and truly building the house for the eternal through Christ and so forth. Then it goes on here in chapter 29, verse 1, it says, furthermore, King David said to all the assembly, my son Solomon, whom God alone has chosen. So he's making it clear to everyone, God does the choosing. Sometimes in the church, people don't understand how things work. And whether it's a person responds in a good way or a bad way, it's like, well, see, they should never have been ordained. Look what they did. Didn't they know? Couldn't they see that in them? I saw that. Well, God has the right to inspire, to work with, to give opportunity to different ones, sometimes for people to learn from things that aren't going to be good. So, nevertheless, there's an attitude that I think of the first one. You think God didn't know what Saul was going to do? King Saul? You think he didn't know that it was going to go to his head, and that he was going to be a jealous individual, jealous of a little young guy that was growing up and then going to become king, and people looking to him because of the things that happened with Goliath? And you think of some of the things that took place in Saul, that he was going to be one who would turn to witchcraft. So you think of different situations. So God's fault? No. Should he then not have been made king? Is that how we judge things? Or do we understand that there are things that God gives at times for people to learn from and allows certain people to be in certain positions for a purpose? Because we can learn from that. But you know what? In all that, David was to be of a mind, of attitude of respect to the king, and he was to the end. He could have killed him several times and never did. He would have been justified in many ways, but he didn't because he was the king God had anointed, and he respected that government that God had established because it was a matter of what God had given. And those are some important things people have to learn. It never gives excuse to do something wrong because you see someone else doing something wrong or because they did something wrong or to misjudge things. But to understand whatever God does, whatever is bound on earth, better be careful. And all the more so for those who are living faithfully to that. And yet I hear from time to time people are still very disrespectful to certain ones in the ministry. Just comes across disrespectful. Sometimes it blows my mind, but it helps me to understand where some are too and see what happens, see if they can overcome that and conquer that. Because there's still some out there very judgmental in some of these areas, wrongly so. So he says here, my son Solomon, whom God has chosen, is young and inexperienced. He's going to make mistakes. He's young and needs to be given some time here, some latitude. Understand he's young. And the work is great because the temple is not for man, but for the eternal God. Now, for the house of my God, I have prepared with all my might gold for the things of gold, silver for the things made of silver, bronze for the things made of bronze, iron for the things made of iron, wood for the things being made of wood, onyx stone to be set, glistening stones of various colors, all kinds of precious stones, and marble slabs in abundance. So David was preparing all this before he died, gathering all these things together before he died, so that Solomon then could build it and giving him the guidelines, the direction, the blueprint, everything else, so that it could be done. So David had part in it, but not able to see it, complete it. And the temple that he's a part of, going to be part of here, going to be quite amazed when it comes to see that, what it was all about, because it's one that God's building. Moreover, because I have set my affection on the house of my God, I have given to the house of my God over and above all that I have prepared for the holy house, my own special treasure of gold and silver. So things that they were incredibly blessed as a people at that particular time. They were so prosperous. If you look at different nations at that particular time, if you were able to, this one was very rich, very wealthy, very productive, incredibly blessed. And they understood they were closer to God because of a king who was close to God and on a physical plane. Incredible, this period of time, and how much God blessed them accordingly because of it. He said, of my own treasure, special treasure, 3,000 talents of gold. So this is what he was laying aside for this, 3,000 talents of gold. Now, if the measurements are correct of what they understood talents were, this is somewhere between 100 and 150 tons of gold, which is like 90,000 to 135,000 kilograms of gold. Now, today, if you looked at that equivalent, we'll just take the median part of this, the middle of this, the average of this, that's worth $13.5 trillion. So it wasn't a small thing. So you can see by that just how incredibly blessed, how wealthy that nation was. Awesome. And all this was going to be used to glorify God. Beautiful. Then it goes on to say that 7,000 talents of refined silver to overlay the walls of the houses, the gold for things of gold, the silver for things of silver, and for all kinds of work to be done by the hands of the craftsmen. Who then is willing to consecrate themselves this day to the eternal? So we ask that. Who is willing to do this today? Then the leaders of the father's house and the leaders of the tribes of Israel, the captains of thousands, of hundreds, with the officers over the king's house, offered willingly. So this is what they were doing. They were going to consecrate what they were going to give to God. They set aside wealth that they had accumulated for themselves and gave it as David did, following suit here. They were inspired. They were excited. They were at a time of rejoicing, knowing what David was telling them about that was getting ready to be constructed and built. Verse 7, they gave of the work of the house of God, or for the house of God, 5,000 talents of gold. Now, $22.5 trillion worth in today's value of gold. And 10,000 daries of gold. This is the gold coins. 10,000 talents of silver, 18,000 talents of bronze, and 100,000 talents. Incredible. 100,000 talents of iron. So much that was used there. The beauty, the massiveness of this building, this structure, it's incredible. And whoever had precious stones gave them to the treasury of the house of the eternal and to the hand of the Jehiel, the Gershonite. And the people rejoiced, for they had offered willingly. So it was a matter of rejoicing. This was something that was done willfully, not by regret or any kind of pressure or anything of that. It was just something that they felt at the time, that freedom and that happiness to be able to do this, to be a part of something that great. Because with a loyal heart, they had offered willingly to the eternal. And King David also rejoiced with great gladness. Now, we need to understand the spiritual part of this, because there is a spiritual building being constructed, and all the wealth that's here, all the wealth should become comparable. The truths we have, like trillions of dollars of gold, of brethren, though small, is not small. The wealth of it all put together because of what's in the mind that God has blessed us to have here, the insight, the knowledge, the understanding, the spiritual grasp of his purpose and his plan in a greater way than any other time in the past 6,000 years. Great wealth. Awesome. And we're able to be a part of all that. But a lot of that has to do with what we give in the construction of the temple, to give willingly, willfully, because that's what we want. We rejoice in that, in the giving and in the sharing. So that which we can do at the feast in a greater way as well, to understand this story of temporary dwellings, of what we're in and what we're working to build upon individually, and to encourage others in being a part of that and doing it together as a body to share in. We are awesomely blessed. And then it goes on to say in verse 11, well, let's read the rest of this. Then the people rejoiced, for they'd offered willingly, as I said. Verse 10, therefore David blessed the eternal before the assembly. And David said, blessed are you, eternal God of Israel, our Father, forever and ever. To rejoice before God, that's what it's about. To thank God, to praise God for what we have. Yours, O eternal, is the greatness, the power and the glory, the victory and the majesty, for all in heaven and all in earth. In writing this book, I have been able to think about things of the universe in ways I've never thought. It's all ours. It's a God family's. We all inherit it together. It is so massive. And what's going to be done with it is so beyond our human minds to comprehend, but to comprehend a little bit more than we have. There's so much to be done, so much to share in. Our lives are going to be so full on the spiritual plane that the greatest of our rejoicing we can do at the feast here, and the greatest excitement we can feel inside, is nothing compared to what we're going to live constantly in God's family. Yours is the kingdom, O eternal, and you are exalted as head over all. Both riches and honor are from you, and you reign over all. Everything is God's, and yet he shares it with us. why it talks about let God raise you up, lift you up. Don't do it to yourself. Don't try to be haughty and make yourself important in front of others and appear to be important. Those are just puke. They're sick. They stink. But when we let God do it, and we're a part of the body, and we're able to see it that way, and the thankfulness of being a part of the body of Christ, the church of God, that's what to rejoice in. And if we rejoice in those things, God, we're lifted up. That's what's pure and good and refreshing and truly enjoyable in life, to where then the rejoicing and the celebrating is easier because we see God and what God has placed before us. Now, therefore, God, we thank you and praise your glorious name. But who am I and who are my people that we should be able to offer so willingly as this? For all things are from you, and of your own we have given to you. Beautiful example here of seeing God as we should. Everything is God's. Everything is God's. And yet sometimes people quibble over giving a tithe, being faithful in the tithe. I know we still have some. I see it once in a while. Send a certain amount in, and you think I'm stupid enough to believe you're living on that? That you're really living on that? And this is it? Or some that have a certain amount that been giving for years, and I don't want to go into that, but anyway, and realize no change. You mean it didn't go up and down at any point? Is this a faithful tithe, the 10% of whatever the net is? Because it's an attitude toward God. It's not about the amount. It's about the faithfulness and the truthfulness, the spirit of it, and the reason we do it. It's important. And so those false things are going to be weeded out before this is all over with. Either we repent and change, or we just continue lying to God, like Ananias and Sapphira did. The only difference is it hadn't taken your life yet. For we are foreigners and pilgrims before you, as were our forefathers. Our days on earth are but a shadow and without hope. It's only because of God that we have what we have. Of ourselves, we're here and we're gone. It goes by so fast, so quickly. O eternal our God, all this abundance that we have prepared to build you a house for your holy name is from your hand and is all your own. I know also, my God, that you test the heart and have pleasure in uprightness. So, to live uprightly before God, truthfully before God, honestly before God, and to yield to what he tells us to do, like rejoicing here at the feast, to be excited, to be stirred up, to have some motivation of excitement. You have to think about that to do it. I have to think about that to do this, so that maybe we can realize this is exciting, and we should have that. As for me, in the uprightness of my heart, I have willingly offered all these things. And now, so truthfulness, David could say this not out of haughtiness and pride. He knew he was speaking to God, and that God knew everything and everything in his mind. And he said he was rejoicing in that it could be from uprightness and heart. That's what he was excited about, that it was because it's true and right. And that's what we rejoice in that ability that we have to live what is true and right. Not to brag about it, but to experience it and to live it and to realize what we have from God. And now, with joy, I have seen your people. We think about one another who are present here to offer willingly to you. O eternal God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, our fathers, keep this, as it says here, forever, in the intent of the thoughts of the heart of your people, and fix their heart toward you. That's the desire. Now give my son Solomon a loyal heart to keep your commandments and your testimonies and your statutes, to do these things, to build the temple for which I have made provision. Then David said to all the assembly, now bless the eternal your God. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what we're supposed to do at the feast, especially. even more so. We're given more at this time of the year, and we should respond more to God Almighty. So all the assembly blessed the eternal God of their fathers and bowed their heads and prostrated themselves before the eternal and King. Awesome. Let's turn over here to 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians. And look at just a few verses here now in the New Testament regarding this manner of rejoicing before God and what's said here. Because this is what we need to apply even more so. We should be doing this all the time, but here at the Feast of Tabernacles. 1 Corinthians 13 and beginning in verse 11, it says, finally, brethren, it's not the word farewell, it's the word rejoice. Finally, brethren, rejoice. It's the way our life should be. Because of God, because of our calling, because of what we have, because of the truth, regardless of what we might suffer through, because that's a part of our growing too. To realize that if we go through suffering, and so our life's in God's hands, no matter what you experience that's hard, that's difficult, that's a trial. To have God, to have the truth, to know that we're in God's hands, live or die, we're in God's hands. Rejoice in it. Be of good comfort. We should be comforted. Be of one mind, as it says. One mind. What a blessing to be in unity and harmony. It's a beautiful thing. Live in peace. To be at peace, to be able to get rid of drama, to try to get drama out of our lives, to try to get drama out of the church. It's a blessing. And the God of love and peace will be with you because it comes from God. Love and peace. Love is about loving others. Peace is what it can produce when we live that way. Greet one another with a holy kiss. In other words, it's spirit of mind. And in this particular case here, different ways of expressing this gratefulness toward one another, for one another. And certainly we don't do that in the sense of a kiss, but it shows that which can be done as they do in Europe and on each side of the head and going back and forth. And it's whether it's an embrace, to embrace someone or to shake hands or whatever it is. That's a matter of communicating that affection back and forth to one another, the gratefulness for someone who's in the body of seeing one another and sharing with one another. It's a beautiful thing. All the saints greet you. The grace of our Lord Joshua the Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. So this is what it's all about. It's about a fellowship that we're able to have, a rejoicing in that, and ever so thankful for it. I'm going to read this one here too. Philippians chapter 4. Philippians chapter 4, and we'll close with this. Philippians 4, verse 4, rejoice in the Lord always. How do you do that? Well, if we can learn at the feast, we can do it all the time. And hopefully we know how to do that already. To rejoice in God. It's a matter of being thankful to God, being grateful to God, seeing what God has given to us, the wealth, the blessings, realizing that's where our trust is, that's where our treasure is, truly. Then that produces something unique in our minds and our lives. It's a beautiful thing. Again, I will say, rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to all. And how you work, treat, and are with people, things you say, things you do, the Lord is at hand. That means He's watching. He's there, so you better do it for the right reasons because you want to do it because it's the right reasons. And if you're not doing it, understand God is there, so you should be doing this. For nothing, or be anxious, I'm sorry. Be anxious for nothing. In other words, trouble with various cares, whatever that might be, things that might weigh us down, things that might cause us to think negatively instead of positively, and to not think about God and what we do have that God has given to us. And that's where our wealth is, to begin feeling woe is me or whatever it might be, to be gloomy, to be down. You know, people can be troubled over things and let it bother them and stress out over it. We all do it. We all experience stress at different times in different ways, and there are times to chill. I need to put that on my dashboard. Anyway, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. Keep God in the picture. Prayer and supplication. Remember that throughout this feast. because this is where the ability to really rejoice before God, because candidly, that power comes from Him. And our ability then to live it, to do it because of what's in our heart, what's in our minds, to see the treasure of what God has given to us is a spiritual thing. And it's automatic then to rejoice in it, to be thankful for it the more we see it. And the peace of God. I'm sorry, backing up here. Uh, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Joshua the Christ. God will give us, put God first, do it in the right way. God will give us everything we need in and through our high priest, Joshua the Christ, our Passover too, because that's needed when we need to repent of sin. Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble and behavior, conversation, whatever it is we do together, whatever things are just, righteous judgment, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there's any virtue, if there's anything praiseworthy, think upon these things. Now, that's a really positive attitude. And if we can think like that, we're able to rejoice because it's exciting. That's what's enjoyable with one another at this feast and the rejoicing together. The fact that God has blessed us to celebrate because He's given us an environment to celebrate in, to be removed from the rest of the world. What a blessing. How blessed are we? So mightily so, truly. Have a great feast. Enjoy it. Rejoice in it. Strive to rejoice in it as you never have before. Put your heart into it.